Right then, folks, our next speaker is somebody, again, who I know very well, so I know I can trust him up on this stage. I call him Mr. Leamington. In fact, most of Leamington call him Mr. Leamington because most of Leamington Spa know him. They know him from when he was employed, as I did, and they know him now he's jumped into the world of self-employment. Gary is really good at focusing on, in fact, he niched down, retail, a lot of retail, and now we all know him for Grow Radio as well. But I remember, and Gary can tell me how many years ago this was, me and him sat in a coffee shop in Leamington. He was employed, he'd got his, I won't say where, but he'd got his uniform on and his little shirt. It was 9 years ago, and he sat there and he went, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go self-employed. I'm going to sack the boss and I'm going to get off. And I was like, yeah, I've only been telling you for ages that you need to do this. And he said, I've got a plan. So he was, Shelley, you'll love this. He's got a plan. It was a 12-month plan, wasn't it? And he said, by the end of 12 months, I'm going to be self-employed. And I was listening to him and yeah, okay. And I said to him, I bet you do it in 6. And he went, no, it's a 12-month plan. I've got actions, I've got steps. It's safe. I've got a backup. He'd got everything. And I said, okay, but I still bet you do it in 6. How long did it take? It's almost like I know what I'm talking about. He is Mr. Leamington to my lady Leamington, and I do love him very much. All the photos, he keeps changing, but the hair never does. Everybody, but that's it, isn't it? It's like part of his brand now. So anyway, please welcome to the stage, Mr. Leamington, Gary Jones. Who keeps changing his shirt colours, by the way.
So, hey folks, how you doing? So, today we are going to be talking all about podcasting. And, well, in this session, you're going to hear me talk about podcasting anyway. And, would help if I did the clicker the right way. So, we're going to start talking about how to start engaging with podcasts. And during this kind of little bit, I'm going to be sharing some details of my journey, which Stacey has fantastically led straight into. So, thank you for that. But also, you're going to be meeting 3 different types of people. Now, the 3 types of people who I speak to on a regular basis, and you might kind of resonate with one of them, you might resonate with a couple of them, but we're going to meet them and we're going to listen to their kind of podcasting habits and experiences. We're also then going to be sharing with you 5 different ways of how you can get involved with podcasting. Now, these are going to be suitable for each and every person in the room because they're all for you, because you're all at different levels. So, just before we start, just quickly share my little story. So, my name's Gary Jones. As Stacey said, I started my own business in 2014, which is why I know it was 9 years ago when we started speaking. But I started listening to podcasts in 2010, just as a casual listener from literally going to work on the train and commuting from Warwick to Oxford. I then literally, and I don't know about you, might just be me, but I had a few glasses of wine on a Sunday afternoon. And I literally just thought to myself, do you know what? Why don't I just tweet just a couple of people, a couple of radio stations in the local area to see if I could get onto one of their radio stations as a guest. Just literally throw it out there, see what happens. And one of them bit and said, do you want to meet up the following day for a chat? That was a company called Radio Warwickshire. Now, Radio Warwickshire met up with me and we kind of spoke about the ideas because at the time I was forming a nice little network in Leamington. And basically I said to them, I want to showcase all the people in my network. I want to shout about their stories, their experiences. And they said, well, actually, you won't be good as a guest on a show. Why don't you start your own show? So a bit of a jump to compare I was, but there was one big issue. I literally had 2 weeks to form a radio show, which effectively was a podcast which they aired at a certain time. And the only bit of equipment I had was a phone. That was the only bit of equipment I had. And it wasn't even this phone, it was a much older model, obviously. So I had 2 weeks and a phone. Needless to say, Did it, started interviewing people, and a couple of years later, it was going really, really well. I had formed a podcast at the same time because I broke that 1 hour show down into 3 individual podcasts, so repurposed the content, and really kind of went from there. From there, I formed my own business, started helping people tell their story, and then I found actually I was talking to 3 different people who you'll meet later on. And that's where Grow Radio was founded, because that brings all of those 3 people all in one place. So that's kind of my story and why I'm standing here talking about podcasting. Now, I want you to meet these 3 different people. I want you to meet Sue, Barry, and Dave. Now, each of those have got different podcasting journeys. All of them have got different podcasting experiences. So, let's meet Sue first of all. So, Sue, I think it's pretty much a lot of people in this room. So, Sue knows about podcasting. She might have listened to a few episodes here and there, and she might have even thought about or been a guest on a couple of different podcasts in the past. But she kind of gets it, but she's a bit hesitant to start her own show because she doesn't want to spend the time doing it. So she's happy listening and kind of just talking about podcasting. Then we've got Barry, or as my other half said, a slightly better looking version of me. Thank you, Simon, for designing those slides to match that. Now, Barry hasn't got a clue about podcasting. He hasn't got a clue whatsoever. He might have heard a few people talk about podcasting or podcasts, but he doesn't really know where to listen to them. And the idea of going onto a show or starting his own show is completely alien to him because, frankly, he hasn't got a clue what they are. Then you've also got Dave. Now, Dave is the podcasting kind of person. He's got a podcast. He knows the power of podcasting. He's got a podcast community. He's been on quite a few different podcasts, and people go to him to say, hey, Dave, what's a podcast? Why don't you start a podcast yourself? Why don't you go onto my podcast? So that's Dave. Quick question to you. Who do you kind of resonate with? Now, you might be in between these people, but quick hands up if you are a Sue. So if you're a Sue, you've been on maybe a few, you've listened to a few and that kind of thing. Okay, yeah, roughly the amount of people I thought. Hands up if you're a Barry. There's nothing wrong with being a Barry because, frankly, it means that actually you've got probably the most to learn. There's no Barrys in the room. Cool, really cool. And who's a Dave? Hands up who's a Dave. Cool, there's a couple of Daves. There's a couple of people who say they're Daves, but they're not actually, who haven't got their hands up and I'm pointing to you there, who could be a Dave, quite happily. But there's quite a few. And I'm guessing, because there's no Barrys in the room, there's no one called Barry who's a Barry in the room. Is there any Sues in the room or any Daves in the room who are Sue or Dave? Dave! Are you a Dave?
I'm Sue on a Saturday.
Nice! Love it. You're the first person to actually be a Dave in the room. So thank you very much. That's really cool. So now we're going to start talking about the 5 things that you can get started with podcasts straight away. And pretty much I'm going to put it through the lens of Sue and Dave because frankly there's no Barrys in the room, so therefore let's not worry about that. So the first thing that you can start doing is you can start listening to podcasts. Now, irregardless of who you are or what your level of podcasting, you can still benefit from listening to different shows. And I'll tell you why. Obviously, you know that they're going to be free to listen to because they're available in the App Store. So we won't go into that. But the benefit is that obviously you can listen to them anywhere. And if you've got your own podcast, your audience can actually listen to you anywhere as well. Doesn't matter if you're walking, cleaning a car, going to the gym, on a train, doesn't matter what you're doing. You can still listen to a podcast, which is absolutely spot on. It is. You can also, and this is the great thing, is if you are someone who's got a podcast or thinking about going on a podcast, you can listen to podcasts to do some research. So if you're going to be a guest on a podcast or you want to get onto different people's podcasts, start listening to the podcasts that you want to get onto. That way you can understand what the host and what the audience expects from you as a guest on a show. You can listen to the questions that they ask, the little formats that they do, the little things that they kind of do to maybe trip or have a bit of fun with their guests. You can kind of preempt it. So it's a really cool way of really kind of figuring it out. And for some people, that makes you more prepared. It makes you more confident and relaxed going into it. It's like Nigel was saying with the role play. You know, you're just practicing. If you've got your own show, you can take it to another different level, because what you can do is you can start listening to different people's shows, and you can really kind of think to yourself, do you know what, I really like that little bit, or I like it how they say that. I love that segment. And guess what you can do? You can start putting it into your own show. Maybe not on all of the time, but you can start just literally feeding in all this good stuff, implementing it in. Or if you're thinking about starting your own show, you can do the same. And guess what you can do with all the bad stuff? You don't do anything with it. You don't make sure you don't make any of the mistakes that you hear on their podcast. So start listening to podcasts that are really beneficial regardless of what level you are at. You can also connect with different podcasting communities. So with that, most podcasts will have a little community which they've set up, which basically gives you more insight into that podcast. Now, I'm a fan of Marvel and DC, so I obviously listen to a Marvel podcast. It would make sense for me to do so. And we properly geek out on what's coming up, what we like, fan theories and all that kind of stuff. So we're around really cool, like-minded people, which on a kind of personal level really ticks boxes because it makes me relaxed and kind of makes me think, actually, I'm not a... I was going to swear then. I don't know if we are swearing. But it makes me feel better than talking to my other half who says, oh, shut up, Gary, you're on it again. So with that kind of group, it's really cool to share ideas, but it's also really cool as a networking tool as well, because you're getting to know people on their level. You're getting to know people on a personal level. And we all know people buy from people, they like Trust Circle, all that kind of stuff is really, really true. But connecting with people on a personal level in a group that's not made for business means that actually when someone does need something, you've already got a link to that person. They already get you, which is fantastic, which makes the selling process a lot easier because they've already bought into you. So podcast communities are fantastic, but they're also great for getting exclusive content and also maybe ad-free content, bonus episodes. Hell, those might even ask you for ideas for future episodes. So joining podcast groups are a great way of doing it. And everybody in the room, if they listen to a podcast, just do a simple search and go from there. Next up is you can become a guest on a podcast. Now, this is a really, really cool way of really showcasing your skills and giving value to your audiences. And not just your audiences, the hosts' audiences, which to be fair, could be a different audience to what you're used to, which means you're expanding network. Now, quick hands up who's been a guest on a podcast at all. Hey, there's quite a few. There is. I'm going to pick on someone, Simon, just because you made Barry good looking. What's the biggest benefit you've got from being a guest on a podcast?
So I've obviously been on there.
Nice.
My expertise, to share that, and then obviously you can then use that to share everyone else.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Who else just wants to share a quick win from doing podcast? That's it. You know, you can really kind of connect with them. And you said something that I was going to go on to is connecting with the audiences afterwards, which is so important. You know, we can use social media not only to kind of talk to different people, but to connect with new audiences if we've been on their shows. And you can do that before the show by literally following them and saying to the people, look, I'm really excited I'm going to be on this show. During it, you can kind of talk to the host and say, do you know what, is there any future collaborations? Would you be open to do this with me? Or, you know, have you got a future collaboration that I could be part of? But then also you can connect on social media. And, you know, for everyone who says thank you or, you know, that's a really cool episode, join them. Say thank you. Connect with them. You know, at the end of the day, they're spending their time to enjoy your content. You share that with them. So being a guest on a podcast is fantastic for everybody regardless of the level. And if you don't think you're suitable for it, or you don't think you've got a kind of standard or you're not qualified to do it, I'll listen to Nigel Shelley, you know, in the room. You know, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about giving your take on the subjects that matter to you. It is. So I'm a big fan of becoming a guest on a podcast. Sponsor a podcast is something that a lot of people tend to kind of shy away from, but actually it's a really easy route to get into podcasting. Because what a podcast sponsor normally does is they'll supply the host a advert, or they'll get the their host to say the advert themselves, but effectively they're giving you a testimonial on their radio station on their podcast to their audience. They are saying to their audience, I like this person, we can do this. Which is a big, big, big thing. But there's 3 things that you need to make sure, if you're looking to sponsor a podcast or that sponsor's looking to kind of work with you, that you need to look out for. First of all, you've got to have the same ethos and principles as the other party. You've got to make sure, and this for me is more important than anything else, you've got to make sure you actually like them. It sounds stupid, but if you don't like it, when you're saying about or giving someone a testimonial, that's going to come across as really false. So we don't want that. We want to make sure it's really natural, and actually, I really love this product because it is, and it's helped me. And also, thirdly, you've got to have the same target audience. Because if you haven't got the right target audience for both parties, there's a slight disconnect there. And actually, you're probably wasting your financial money, finances, plus also your time actually doing it. So you need those 3 things. You need the ethos and principles, you need the target audience, and also you've got to like them. You really do. But that's something that is open to anybody, regardless if you are a Sue, Dave or Barry. I went to the last one. So the last one is you can start, obviously, your own podcast. Now, this is the most time-extensive one. And for me, as you can tell, I'm not a fan of saying to people that you've got to have loads of fancy equipment to do it. I'm not a fan of that. I started off with my mobile phone in 2 weeks. What I believe, and this is the same for pretty much most projects, that you can start something and then you can improve it as you go along. Done is better than perfect at the start. So with your podcasting equipment, you really only need 2 things to do it. You need something to record it, and you need something to share it. That's basically all you do. And what equipment you have, you can fluff it up. But technically, you could potentially do it just with a mobile phone. That's all you really need. Okay, the quality might not be as good, but the principle's still there. You can still improve it. So for me, the equipment's not important. It's the idea that's important. You need to make sure that the idea is completely sound. You know who you're trying to target in terms of your audience. You know what they're going through. You know the content that's going to resonate with them. And frankly, you know them because you are probably that audience as well. You also need 3 things as well. You need to have the passion to be able to carry it on, because it's not going to start kind of hitting it off straight away. It's going to be a slow burn. People who think starting a podcast today and it's going to get you a kind of £1 million or loads of followers the following day, they're not. It really isn't. It's going to take time. It's just like any marketing activity. It's going to take time to do. So you've got to have a passion to keep on doing it. You've also got to be interested in the topic as well. If you're not interested in the topic, when times get tough, that's going to be the first bit that's going to kind of fall down by the wayside because you're not frankly invested in it. So you've got to be interested in it. Also, you've got to have the confidence. At the end of the day, you're putting your head above the parapet and saying, look, I would like you to spend your time, listen to my show, listen to my podcast. And that's brave. That is brave to do. Even if you're sharing it as a guest, that's brave to do. So you've got to have the confidence to do it. But if you think that starting your own podcast is kind of the first step, it kind of is. If you've already got your own podcast, you can be slowly improving your podcast every time you record. Be that changing the processes, mixing it up with maybe a live show here and there. Why not? You can take it on the road. You can maybe turn your podcast into a book, into a series of talks, video, whatever you fancy. You can mix it up and have a bit of fun with it. All of that stuff is going to keep it interested for you. So for me, those are the 5 ways that you can get engaged with podcasts. So out of all those ideas, and you don't have to write them down now, but just have a think about maybe 3 or just one thing you want to start doing. Whether that's starting to listen to a couple of the shows a week, or maybe kind of just approaching someone and throwing that on social media and saying, fancy becoming a guest on a podcast, does anyone know anyone? Could be as simple as that. It could be to say, do you know what, actually, I need to buy that mic to actually improve my quality of voice. Or actually, if I've got an online form, it will save me time booking guests. Whatever it is, start thinking about it. Because podcasting isn't actually that scary when you break it down. It's just a process. And that's what a lot of people tend to think. that's kind of my lot for today. So thank you very much for listening. I just want to say, if anybody wants to have a quick 20-minute chat with me, just send me a message on socials. You know, got the beef over there. Let's have a chat. But the main thing I want to say, thank you very much. And cheers, Stacey and Simon, for creating the slides, and Stacey for the opportunity. Thank you all. Bye-bye. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Gary. I have to say, when I said I knew Gary was brilliant at podcasting, it's because he is. So I got told the other week that I have a voice for podcasting. I think that means I haven't got a face for telly, is what they were trying to tell me. But apparently I'm quite good on a podcast. So we've got our own BSN podcast. I'm not going to lie, Gary does all the techie stuff. So I sit there, I get the fun bit, I get to talk to lots of people, I get to find out the juicy bits about them and their business and their stories. And then Gary puts it all together and makes it look really good on Spotify and Apple and YouTube and all that stuff that I don't really get how it works, but it looks good because Gary does it. So thank you, Gary. And as you can see, he is absolutely a product of his product, because he started off as a podcast and now he's on the radio. So we're going out on the radio today, live, so... you know, that'll be fun. Thank you, Gary. There is like nothing he can't do, though. So when he says take 20 minutes with him, please take 20 minutes with him. Felix, you need 20 minutes with him, because I just think you'd be brilliant at it. So there we go. Thank you very, very much, Gary.